Where we are in our study of Psalm 103 today centers around the concept of redemption. Redemption is a word that implies helplessness. Now, the word picture of redemption is someone who's held captive by forces that cannot be overcome. Only a third party can intervene to rescue. Because how many of you know your flesh cannot redeem anything? Yeah, your flesh will never produce spiritual outcomes. It cannot redeem, it cannot restore, it cannot recover. For kingdom life to be established in you and flow through you, it will not be by might nor by power, but by the Spirit of the Lord. Jesus said, what is born of flesh is flesh. What is born of spirit is spirit. And Paul said, in me, that is in my flesh, dwells no good thing. So redemption never comes by our own efforts, and the reason why is redemption cannot happen without a redeemer. We've been in Psalm 103 for the last 5 weeks. We'll read the first 3.5 verses today. Let's start in Psalm 103, verse 1, where it says, "Bless the Lord, O my soul, and all that is within me, bless his holy name." Time out, time out. We're going to stop right there for just a moment. Before we go any further, and I know we didn't make it past verse 1, I know that, but back in week 1, when we studied verse 1, we talked about blessing the Lord. We talked about, talking to your soul. We talked about the key being blessing the Lord with all that is within us. But what we did not cover is the directive to bless his holy name. So let's briefly go back before we go forward, because this demarcation in David's song teaches us something that is vital to our spiritual understanding and development, and it is the fact that God's name is holy. His names reveal his character, his nature, his ability, his willingness, and his name is holy. Now, the word holy is not a word that speaks to morality. It's not. Most people think it is, but it's not a word that speaks to morality. Why? Well, understand this. The temple was holy. The furnishings in the temple, they were holy. The garments on the priests, they were holy. So those buildings and those garments are neither moral or immoral. Holy speaks of something that is sacred, dedicated, set apart, consecrated, and utterly unique. The first name for God in the Bible, Genesis 1:1, the name Elohim is holy. The name El Shaddai, El Elyon, El Olam, the name El is holy. The name Adonai, Yehovah, Jehovah Jireh, our provider, Jehovah Rapha, our healer, Jehovah Sidkenu, our righteousness, Jehovah Nisi, our banner, and Jehovah Shalom, our peace. All of them are sacred and set apart. Bless his holy name. That's why the second of the 10 commandments is, thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain, because it's holy. In Exodus 3, in the burning bush, when Moses is talking to a burning bush and the burning bush is talking back, and he still asks for a sign, which I'll never get. But all kidding aside, God manifests his holy presence in a bush that is on fire but not being burnt. And then when Moses asks him, who should I say sent me? God tells him, ready? I am who I am. And he said, thus you shall say to the children of Israel, I am has sent me to you. The I am name of God in theology is known as the tetragrammaton. It is 4 Hebrew letters, Yod, He, Vav, He. Follow closely here. Every time Jesus says, I am, and he says it 7 times, He says, I am the bread of life. I am the light of the world. I am the gate. I am the vine. I am the good shepherd. I am the resurrection and the life. And I am the way, the truth, and the life. Every time Jesus makes an I am statement, he is also saying, I am Yahweh. I am Adonai. I am the God whose name is too sacred to say. I am the everlasting covenant God. I am the eternal, self-existent, self-sustaining, beginningless beginning of all things, and I am the I am who spoke from the burning bush to Moses. I am the God who dwells in the bush that is on fire but not being consumed by the fire, because I am the God who dwells in the midst of my people, and although they may go through the fire of affliction, because I am in the midst of them, they shall never be consumed by it. I am that I am. That's who I am. That's what I do. I am that I am. And when Jesus hung, suspended between heaven and earth, on Calvary's cruel cross, Pilate had posted a plaque above his head. Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews, in Hebrew, Greek, and Latin. In Hebrew, it would be Yeshua HaNazaret Vemlech. Let me try it again. It's not easy. Yeshua HaNazaret Vemlech HaYehudim. Jesus of Nazareth, King Vemlech of the Jews. And when Pilate put that plaque above his head, the Jewish leadership freaked out. They lost it. They were appalled. And here's why. Because the first letter of every Hebrew word holds special significance for the Jewish reader. Every Jewish person that would see, they would see the first letter of a word basically jump off the page at them. It's what they'd notice first. So when he puts that plaque up there from right to left, right? Yeshua HaNazaret Vemlech HaYehudim. The first letters are Yod, Hey, Vav, Hey. My family, because Jesus is the great I am. Because he is Yahweh who became flesh and dwelt among us. When you go through the fire, you will not be burned. When you go through the flood waters, they will not drown you. When you go through any kind of adversity, challenge, trial, tribulation, or trouble, you will not be overcome by it. You will not be consumed by it. Want to know why? Because the name of the Lord is a strong tower. The righteous run into it and they're safe. Bless the Lord, O my soul, and all that is within me. Bless his holy name. Okay, so let's read through the whole thing. The first, actually what we're going to read through today is the first 3.5 verses of Psalm 103, where it says, bless the Lord, O my soul, and all that is within me, bless his holy name. Bless the Lord, O my soul, and forget not all his benefits, who forgives all your iniquities, who heals all your diseases, who redeems your life from destruction. The word redeem means to buy back. To buy back. Back at the early part of the 20th century, so early 1900s, there was a little boy who got all the materials together and built himself a sailboat, little sailboat. And he did an incredible job. I mean, in the end, he covered the bottom with pitch. He had the mast and he had everything, painted it just right. It looked beautiful. It really looked like something. The only question was, like, would it sail? And so the town that he lived in happened to be on the shores of a big lake. And so he went out to the lake one day and he put his little sailboat in the lake, and a little breeze kicked up, and it worked too well because it just kept sailing away. 2 weeks later, as he's walking down little Main Street in his town, he comes across the local 5 and dime store, and he wanders in, and on the shelf is his boat. So he starts to climb the shelf to get his boat. The owner comes by and says, "What are you doing?" He says, "That's my boat." He says, "No, it's not." The owner said, "No, that's my boat. Somebody came in here, and I bought it from them. That's my boat." And he says, "No, that's my boat. I made it." He says, "No, son, that's my. If you want it, it's $2. Now, back in the day, that's a lot of money, $2. You come back with $2, you can have the boat. So the boy left, and he cut a couple lawns, and he opened up a lemonade stand, and he did everything he can to get the $2. And he finally got the $2. He went back into the 5 and dime store. He paid the $2, and he got the boat. On the way out of the store, he could be heard saying, "You're mine. You're mine. You're twice mine, because I made you, and now I bought you." To be redeemed is to be twice his. How many of you know God made you, and then he bought you back at the price of his only begotten Son? Again, the word redeem means to buy back, but also the word destruction is there, to be redeemed from destruction. Destruction in Hebrew is shachach, and it means a pit, a ditch, the grave, corruption, destruction. The Lord redeems you when people try to trap you and trick you, when they try to ensnare you with evil schemes and scams. He redeems you from being stuck in routines that become ruts. He redeems you from grave situations where there seems like there's no way out. He redeems you when others reject you. How many of you know he redeems you when other people act like you're disposable? He redeems you from the pit, from being down and out, from being without hope, from the grip of the wicked one. Your God redeems you from financial ruin. He redeems you from chaos and corruption, from depression and despair, from crushing loss and pain. The Lord redeems you from anything that tries to own you, anything that tries to imprison you, anything that tries to enslave you. The Lord redeems you from the throes of addiction, from the perils of seduction, and from the futility of pure consumption, a life consumed with consuming. He redeems you from corruption, trauma, degradation, and devastation, both in this life and in the life to come. Listen carefully to the words of Jesus in Matthew chapter 7, where he says, "Enter by the narrow gate. For wide is the gate and broad is the way that leads to destruction. And there are many who go in by it. Because narrow is the gate and difficult," that word would be better translated as confined or constrained, "is the way which leads to Zoe life. And there are few who find it." Now, real quickly, let's clear something up, and it's very important. Jesus is not talking about heaven and hell in this verse. He's not. He's not talking about heaven and hell. Because he said that there would be few that would go in through the narrow gate. Can I tell you something? In Revelation, the sheer multitude around the throne of God is a number that cannot be numbered. That's how many will make it. That's how many will be in heaven. It won't be a few. It'll be an innumerable multitude. So Jesus is not talking about heaven. He didn't say heaven. He said life. He said it's the way that leads to life, not heaven. And when he says destruction, he's not talking about hell. Jesus didn't say hell. The Greek word is apolia, and it means the loss of well-being. Pastor Kyle Idleman wrote the following. He said, Jesus was never interested in having fans. When he defines what kind of relationship he wants, enthusiastic admirer isn't an option. My concern is that many of our churches in America have gone from being sanctuaries to becoming stadiums, and every week all the fans come to the stadium where they cheer for Jesus but have no interest in truly following him. The biggest threat to the church today is fans who call themselves Christians but aren't actually interested in following Christ. They want to be close enough to Jesus to get all the benefits, but not so close that it requires anything from them. Listen, you can be like everybody else. You can do what everybody else is doing. You can let the puppet masters and the propagandists do all your thinking for you. You can follow the crowd right through the broad gate. Proverbs 14 says, there is a way that seems right to a man, but its end is the way of death. Listen carefully, you can follow the crowd or you can follow Christ, but you can't do both. That's not an option. That's not on the table. If you mix cold with hot, you get lukewarm. And what did Jesus say? If you're lukewarm towards me, I'll spew you right out of my mouth. But God has made a way. He's made a way for you not to go through the wide gate, not to go through the broad way and the loss of well-being. If you will choose the way of Jesus, if you will choose life, if you will choose to be a fully devoted follower, an apprentice to Jesus, if you'll sit at the feet of Jesus and hear his word and become a real disciple of Christ, listen, if you'll choose to humble yourself, he'll exalt you. If you'll choose to be last, he'll make you first. If you'll choose to serve, he'll make you great. If you choose to be generous, he'll make sure you always have more than enough. And if you'll choose to lay down your life, lay down your selfishness, lay down your self-absorption, lay down your agenda and your selfish pursuits, guess what? If you'll lay that down, he'll lift you up and you will find life and life more abundantly. Like, this is how you don't destroy your marriage. This is how you don't crush your kids. This is how you don't detonate your career. This is how you don't hijack your own livelihood. This is how you don't sabotage your future. Like, this is how you avoid blowing up your life. Do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says. Do what it says. Jesus said when the storms of life come, and by the way, they will come. He didn't say if, he said when. When the storms, they come to everybody. I don't care if you've got great faith or no faith, storms come. He says, but when they come, you'll be good. You'll still be standing on the other side of the storm if you do what he says to do, because this is your path to freedom. This is your path to joy. This is your path to stability, resiliency, and true security. This is your path to financial freedom, emotional wholeness, mental wellness, and spiritual shalom. Nothing missing, nothing broken. If you'll do life according to what is written, you'll be on the path that leads to Zoe life. But if you've gone down the wrong path, if you've had to reap some ugly consequences of your own jacked up decisions, if your life's been stagnant, stuck in neutral or in reverse, if things in your life have been destroyed, if you haven't been able to figure it out, if you've tried but you've been unable to fix yourself or heal yourself or change yourself, even if the collateral damage of your choices has had a devastating and lasting ripple effect on the quality of your life, your relationships, and your connection with God, you know what that means? That means you need to be redeemed from destruction. And, are you ready? Christ has redeemed us. Say it with me. Christ has redeemed. Say it again in a loud voice. Christ has redeemed us. He's redeemed us from the curse of the law, having become a curse for us. For it is written, cursed is everyone that hangs on a tree. So whenever I think of the idea of redemption, I always think of what I think might be the best example, at least in the Old Testament, is the book of Ruth. In the book of Ruth, it starts with a couple living in Bethlehem of Judah, so where Jesus was born, but many, many centuries before Jesus. A couple lived there when a famine hit. The couple's name was Naomi and Elimelech, and they had two boys, Mahlon and Chilion. And so when the famine hits Israel, Elimelech decides, you know what, let's leave Israel and we'll go to Moab because maybe we can get food in Moab. Can I just tell you something? A terrible decision. A terrible decision. Rather than stay where the Lord planted you, rather than stay in the confines of the covenant of God, Elimelech said, you know what? I can fix this. I can fix this famine thing. Come on, everybody. We're going to leave Israel and we're going to go to Moab. Moab. Like the worst place you could possibly pick that could offend the Lord your God would be Moab. I don't have time to do all the background. I just want to tell you that God says in Deuteronomy that the inhabitants of Ammon, the Ammonites and the Moabites, are not allowed into the congregation of his people for 10 generations. And he didn't mean like 400 years. 10 is another number of completeness. He says completely, they're locked out of the covenant and they're locked out of the assembly of my own people. And again, don't have the time. Just suffice it to say, the people of Moab, the whole people were born out of incest. So it was disgusting, an abomination. So they go off to Moab. Bravo, Elimelech, great choice. When they get there, the two boys, they take two Moabite wives. Guess what? The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. They're not supposed to take Moabite wives, but they do. And Elimelech in Moab dies. The boys have their wives, two Moabite women, Orpah, not Oprah, but Orpah, and Ruth. And then after being married for 10 years, both of the sons die. So it's just Naomi and her two daughter-in-laws, Orpah and Ruth. Now, Naomi hears that the Lord has visited Israel and the famine's over, so she gathers her daughters and says, listen, I'm going to go back to Israel. Because Naomi's plight now, having no sons and no husband, she is now in poverty. She's in now abject poverty. I'm just going to go back there. At least I can get grain back. I'm just going to go back to Israel. You girls stay here in Moab. You go back to your mother's house. They all cry. They all kiss. And then both girls say, no. No, we're going to stay with you, Naomi. She says, what are you going to stay with me for? The Lord has dealt very bitterly with me. What are you going to do? You're going to stay till I have more sons? You're going to wait for them to grow up? Like if I got a husband tonight and I had kids, are you going to wait for them to grow up to marry them and deprive yourselves? That's ridiculous. Go home. Orpah weeps, kisses her, and leaves. Ruth weeps and cleaves. She clings to Naomi. Can I just tell you something? When you're down and out, when you're going through it, when you're in a place of adversity, you don't need people who are going to give you a kiss and say goodbye. You need people who are going to cling to you, stick with you, go through it with you. And what does she say? She says, oh, no, I'm not going anywhere. Where you go, I'll go. Where you stay, I'll stay. Your people shall be my people. Ready? And your God, your Elohim, shall be my Elohim. I will die and be buried where you are buried, and the Lord, Yahweh, she says, do more so to me, if anything but death separates the two of us. And you know what Naomi says? Nothing. and they go on back to Bethlehem. When they get to Bethlehem, the whole city gathers. Naomi's back, Naomi's back. After all these years, Naomi's back, and they greet her, and she says, why do you even call me Naomi? Naomi means pleasant. She says, from now on, call me Mara, which means bitter. For the Almighty has dealt bitterly with me. And so there they are now, Ruth and Naomi, they're in Bethlehem. And the next day, now that there's a harvest again, and now that there's wheat again, Ruth says to Naomi, Ma, listen, I got to go get us some food, so let me go out and glean. Real quickly, gleaning was prescribed in Leviticus chapter 19 for the poor. When there'd be a harvest of a field, they were commanded to leave the corners of the property unharvested so the poor could come in and take that, glean, that harvest the corners of a property. She says, Mom, I'm going to go out and I'm going to glean. And she says, okay, the Lord be with you. And she goes out, and it says, and she happened to find the field of a man named Boaz. She just happened. How many of you know nothing just happens? Nothing just, she's in, and so she's gleaning there, right? And then Boaz comes back, he gets his head servant, and he says, who's that woman out there gleaning? Oh, he says, that's the woman who came home with Naomi from Moab. That's Ruth the Moabitess. He says it like 3 times, just in case he doesn't get it the first time. She's from Moab. She's a Moabitess. And he says, okay, here's what I want you to do. You don't give her any fuss. And by the way, instruct all your men not to lay a hand on her. You let her glean amongst our people, and when she needs water, she drinks where you drink. And instruct everybody that as they harvest, to just intentionally throw a little grain. Every now and then they just got to throw a little grain for Ruth. And then Boaz goes to Ruth. He says, my daughter, listen, you stay in this field. You don't need to go to another field. I've instructed my men not to touch you. You stay with them. You drink where they drink. And by the way, it's time for a meal, so now sit at my table with my servants. And she's like, why? Why do you favor me so much? He says, I heard about you. I heard about your character. I heard about your loyalty. I heard about your faithfulness to your mother-in-law. And now the Lord repay you. So she gets an ephah of grain, so 3/5 of a bushel of grain, and she brings it home. Ma, look what I got. And she's like, blessed be he who of the Lord who allowed you to glean. Who was it? She says, it's a man named Boaz. Boaz. Naomi's like, Boaz, you found the field of Boaz. Boaz is, listen carefully, he is she didn't say he's a close relative. He is a kinsman redeemer. In Hebrew, the Goel. Real quickly, what that meant was if the men passed away and all that was left was a wife, the next closest relative, male relative, could come in and buy back everything that man owned, all his fields, all his properties, his homes, and he'd also have to take his wife and have children with her so that there would be a posterity for the man who passed away. Are you following? Okay, I'm moving on anyway. But anyway, so he's a Goel. He's a kinsman redeemer. Stay in his field. Stay close. Don't go to any other field. And so she stays with Boaz in the field for all of this time. And at the end of the barley harvest, she comes home and Naomi says, do I not want the best for you? Do I not want to seek security for you? She says, sure, Ma. She says, okay, so here's what you're going to do tonight. You're going to go take a bath. You're going to put on your best dress and your best perfume. And tonight, Boaz will be winnowing in the threshing floor. So you're going to sneak over there and you're going to watch him. until he gets tired enough to lay down and go to sleep. When he lays down and goes to sleep, you're going to sneak on in, and you're going to uncover his feet and just lay down at his feet. Listen, no hanky-panky happened. No hanky-panky happened. If it did, the Bible would tell us, but it did not. So she lays down, and so she does it, right? He's winnowing, he eats, he drinks, he's tired, he lays down there, and she comes and she lays down. He wakes up at midnight and says, "Who are you?" You know, it's not like he could flick on a nightlight or anything. "Who are you?" She said, it's Ruth. He says, "Oh, you've been kinder to me at the end than from the beginning, because you could have went out and had yourself any young man that you wanted, but you've decided to come here." She says, "Please take me under your wings." It's the language of redemption. "Take me under your wings, for you are a kinsman redeemer." He says, "Yes, I will do all that you say. However, you must know that I'm not the kinsman redeemer. There's somebody closer to you, but just stay here. You just go home to Naomi and you just sit." She comes home to Naomi, tells her everything. She says, "My daughter, just sit right here, because this will be concluded today. He's not even going to let this go into tomorrow. He'll take care of it today." And he does. He goes to the gate of the city, because he's a wealthy man. He's a businessman. He goes to the gate of the city. And all of a sudden, here comes the kinsman redeemer. They don't even give him a name. He says, "Friend, come and sit down over here." In Hebrew, you know what that is? It's not friend in Hebrew. In Hebrew, it's, "Hey, so-and-so." Doesn't even, "Hey, buddy, over here. Elders, sit down." And then he tells them, "Okay, Naomi came back, blah, 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 and you are the kinsman redeemer. If you want to redeem, then you'll get Elimelech's property, you'll get Mahlon's property, Chilion. If you want to redeem it. He says, "I will redeem it." He says, "Okay, well, there's just one caveat, a little fine print here for you. When you redeem for Naomi, you've got to marry Ruth the Moabitess." And then he says Moab a bunch of times. You know, the one from Moab. You have to marry her. He says, "Oh, I cannot redeem." He says it twice. "I cannot redeem it. I cannot redeem it." In other words, if I bring a Moabite woman home with me, I'm going to be in deep yogurt, okay? So fine. He has to, in the tradition, he has to give his sandal to Boaz. Boaz takes the sandal. He's got it. He goes back. They have a child. Can I just pause for one moment? I got to say something here. I think it's very, very important. And I want to speak to you, for right now, the single people, specifically the single women here. Can I just tell you something? Wait for your Boaz. No, wait for your Boaz. Now for the men, wait for your Ruth. but back to the ladies, wait for your Boaz. Boaz was a wealthy man. He was a good-looking man. He was a businessman. He was a man of character. He was a man of faith. And when you put all that together, that makes a good husband, right? That's a good husband. So you wait. Don't settle. Okay, I'm going to take no credit for what I'm about to say. I'm going to give credit to whom credit is due. Because I heard another pastor say this, and I want to make sure you know this is from another pastor, okay? Jensen Franklin from Free Chapel in Gainesville, Georgia, who's a phenomenal pastor, a phenomenal church, but he says that Boaz had some cousins. And they could have settled for, and Boaz is spelled B-O-A-Z. He said, wait for your Boaz, because he's got some cousins you could settle for, and you don't want his cousins. He had some cousins, they were called cheap ass, broke ass, Poaz, drunk ass, good for nothing ass. Wait for your Boaz. Jensen Franklin. Anyway, I'll let him know you like that. So anyway, Boaz marries Ruth. Ruth has a baby boy. They name him Obed. Naomi becomes his nurse. The women of the community say, listen, God brought you back because he gave you a daughter-in-law who loves you more than 7 sons. May she be like Rachel and Leah who built Israel. May their household be like the household of Perez. Perez in Hebrew means breakthrough. May your house be a house of breakthrough. And so, are you ready? Are you ready? Little Obed grows up and he has a son named Jesse. Jesse grows up, he has a son named David. And 28 generations later, Jesus is the son of David. Ruth becomes the Moabitess becomes the great grandma to the Lord Jesus. Oh, snap. God brings his people from famine into abundance. He brings his people from bitterness into happiness. He brings you from emptiness into fullness, from despair to hope. You see, you were a Moabite out in the field, and your Redeemer noticed you. He pursued you. He protected you. He preserved you. He provided for you. He took you from being a foreigner into the covenant of God. He took you from being a stranger, alienated from God. He took you from the outside and brought you in. He accepted you. He drew you with cords of love. He found you. He favored you and fed you. Your Redeemer was thinking of you. He gave you somewhere to belong. He gave you a seat at his table. He gave you bread and wine. His only desire was to bless you and make you his own. Jesus rescued you. Jesus paid your ransom. And Jesus has redeemed your life from destruction. Because you want to know why? He made you. The Bible says all things were made by him, for him, and through him. But he didn't just make you, he bought you back. You are his twice. You see, let's finish up here. Ready? We stopped. We stopped actually halfway through a verse, halfway through verse 4 in the 103rd Psalm, but we did that intentionally for a reason. Here's the whole verse. 103:4 says, who redeems your life from destruction, who crowns you with loving kindness and tender mercies. See, the Lord doesn't just rescue you, he crowns you. He doesn't just ransom you, he crowns you. He doesn't just redeem you, he crowns you. Romans 5 verse 17 says, those who receive abundance of grace and the gift of righteousness will reign in life through the one Jesus Christ. It's why you're called a royal priesthood in 1 Peter. It's why every believer is called a king and a priest under their God in Revelation chapter 1. Think about it. Think about it. When God brought Israel out of Egypt, when he redeemed them from 400 years of bondage, he didn't just let them escape the borders and say, okay, now you guys are on your own. No. He went before them and behind them. He led them out with a high hand. He was to the newly released Israelites, he was a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. He split the Red Sea. He closed it in on their enemies. He fed them with manna and then with quail in the wilderness. He turned bitter waters into sweet and gave them water out of a rock. And then after 40 years of wandering, God splits the Jordan River and they go into a land flowing with milk and honey. Now watch this. In Exodus 3 it says, and the Lord said, I have surely seen the oppression of my people who are in Egypt, and I have heard their cry because of their taskmasters. For I know their sorrows. So I have come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians and to bring them up from that land to a good and large land, to a land flowing with milk and honey. when your Redeemer redeems you, it's because he has seen your situation, he has heard your cry, and he is personally acquainted with your sorrows, and he loves you. So he came down, he left the perfection of heaven and came down in the person of Jesus, not so you could just barely get by, not so that you could just keep your head above water by gleaning from somebody else's leftovers just so you can survive. He came that you might thrive, that you might have life and have it more abundantly. Jesus came down to deliver you out and lift you up and bring you in. He doesn't just redeem you, he crowns you. He crowns you with loving kindness and tender mercy. Listen, he wore the crown that we deserved so we could wear the crown that only he deserved. Know this, Jesus wore a crown of thorns so you could be crowned with loving kindness and tender mercy. If you've accepted Jesus as Lord of your life, no more hanging your head, no more shuffling your feet. Raise up the hands that hang down. Strengthen the weak knees. Lift up your head. No more shame. No more shame. You're wearing a crown today. You're wearing a crown today. And on your crown it says mercy. On your crown it says grace. On your crown it says beloved. On your crown it says prosperous. On your crown it says healed. Are you hearing me? Hallelujah. Come on, everybody stand. Everybody stand with me. Everybody stand. Everybody stand.